Welcome everyone to another 15-minute Feature Friday. My name is Daniel Freppert. I'm a solutions engineer. I'm going to be talking today about a feature called automated device password management. Specifically, what I'm referring to here is the ability to manage your passwords through the XProtect management client. So the first thing here is why do we want to use that client here? Why do we want to use XProtect to manage passwords? What's the actual value? So the first thing is we're extending that centralized management aspect onto those passwords, right? So from the management client itself, we can go in and we can update passwords, we can change passwords, we can view the passwords of the devices directly from the management client itself, instead of having to log in directly to those devices via web page to make those changes. So the feature that we're going to focus the most on here is a feature called automated password management or automated password updates. This feature was released with the 2019 R3 release, and it allows us to change those passwords on a schedule, basically going in and creating rules to allow us to change those passwords on a schedule, right? The big benefit here is we can start to conform to a lot of different IT policies and requirements. And then, as you all know, cybersecurity is a big deal. So, kind of allowing us to stay on those standards is the big benefit for password management. So before we get into the automated side of things, I want to take a step back and just talk a little bit about the standard device password management that we released in 2019 R2. So this feature here allows us to go in and manually change passwords and view those passwords from the management client. So I can go in to my management client, I can right click on a device and change the password if necessary. I can see when that password was changed last, and I can view the new password in the system. Passwords can be changed individually, device by device, or I can bulk change multiple devices at the same time by making that selection on the recording server level. Two types of passwords. We have user defined. So if I want to use the same password for multiple devices and I want to define it as the user, I can go ahead and do that. But our main recommendation would be to generate these passwords based off of the manufacturer requirements. So if your manufacturer says, hey, it's got to be 8 characters long, uppercase, lowercase, and a number, based off of the driver, we know what the requirements are for that specific manufacturer, and we'll generate a strong password based off of that requirement. Now, the main focus of this 15-minute Feature Friday is the automated side of things. So as I mentioned before, in 2019 R3, we released the automated device password management. This extends out to XProtect Corporate, Expert, and Professional Plus. So 2019 R3 or 2020 R1 is where you'll find this feature. Automated device password management allows us to go in and generate rules within the system to manage when those passwords are changed. So again, passwords can now be changed as scheduled. The frequency actually goes all the way up to every hour. Not that that's going to be, a request for a lot of installations. If the IT department requires you to change the password on your device every hour, that's pretty extreme. But just know we do support that. When you create passwords with the rule engine, they're going to be generated based off of the manufacturer requirements. So that user-defined option that we see in the manual change process, it's not an option here with the automated side. So it's going to generate that strong password for you when you generate it with the rules. So I've mentioned a few times now that the devices need to be supported. Now, you can go to our website, you can look at our supported device list, and in those device lists, you will see which devices specifically are supported. Right now, the manufacturers that we support password management on are Axis, Bosch, Hanwha, Panasonic, Hikvision, and then ONVIF conformant devices. So if you've got a model of device that you're putting in place and you want to know, hey, does this actually support the feature of password management? You could take a look at that supported device list and it will display, hey, yes, this one does support it or this model does not. If it's a pre-existing installation, the nice feature here, though, is you have the ability to see directly in the management client if that specific device is supported or not. Basically, when I go into the management client, I right-click on a device to change the password. If the option is there and it's not grayed out, it is supported. Same thing with the rule engine. When we're looking at the automated function, in the rule engine, when I'm making my decision, which device to actually change or what devices, plural, if they're on the list in the rule engine, they are supported devices. So the rule section doesn't actually show devices that are not supported. So very, very useful for, pre-existing installations. I have, all of these devices out there already. I want to know which ones are supported. Within the management client itself, it does show which devices are going to be supported. So that's a little background on the feature. What we're going to do now is jump into a live demo of how this is accomplished. And then we'll come back to the presentation and just, open it up for questions. So let's jump to the management client. And in my management client here, the first thing that I want to just go over is the basics, right? We have the manual password management feature, as I talked about before. So just a little refresher on that change. If I right click on a device, I see I have change hardware password as the option. If I go to a device that's not supported, like this Canon PTZ here, if I right click on it, I don't have the option to change hardware password. So that's one of those devices that is not technically supported with the device management password changes. Now, again, I just want to run through this real quick, and then we're going to focus on the automation part, right? Actually building the rule and seeing how that performs. So I'm going to right click on my recording server. I'm going to go change hardware password. And I am going to see this list, right? These are all of the devices that are on my lab recording server right now. Once again, we see that Canon PTZ is not supported. If I mouse over the option there, it says hardware driver does not support the action. But from this interface here, I could select multiple recording servers. I only have one on my system, so there's only one there. But I can go ahead and check the devices that I want to change the password on manually. If I hit next, we're presented with those two options that I mentioned before. You have the ability to generate the password, which is the recommended choice. In a little overview, again, the system is going to generate a unique password for each hardware device, and it's going to be based off of the manufacturer requirements. If I wanted to do a one-time user-defined password, this could apply to all three of these devices. One thing to note on changing passwords, and when I hit next, you'll get another little pop-up that says, changing the password causes the device to momentarily go down. So from an operator standpoint, you might momentarily lose connection, but that change or that the reconnection comes up very, very quickly. So if I hit yes, again, it's queuing up those three devices. You might see down in the preview windows, these cameras go down for just a second. Office camera 2 just went down. It's going to come back up, and we have full success across all three. Now, again, that feature has been around since 2019 R2, and that, again, we've covered previously. So I want to point out a couple things just because we get quite a few questions on them. Number one is, how do I know the last time a password has been changed, right? So I have a policy in place. The IT department needs me to prove that these devices are, they have new passwords every 90 days. From the interface of each device, in the info tab, there's a new field called password last changed. So that actually shows the date and the time. The other question that we get quite a bit is, what if I need to actually go and web into one of these devices? Maybe I need to set up edge storage. Maybe I'm using some analytics on the edge and I actually need to go into the web interface. I need to know the password. If I right click on a device and I go to edit hardware, in this field on the bottom, it shows the authentication. So here's your username. Here's that auto-generated password that was just created for this device. So I could copy paste and then log into the camera if I needed to. Now, as I mentioned before, I want to focus more on the automated side rather than just going through the manual process of changing devices. Again, the real value here is I can schedule these different password changes so I don't have to manually go in every 90 days and manually change multiple devices at the same time. So the way that we do that is in the rules. So if you look at my rule engine here, I've basically just got default rules. I've got a record always rule, but I have created an automated device password management rule. And as you can see here, it's a very, very simple rule. We're going to perform an action on a reoccurring time. That reoccurring time is going to occur every day, every hour, basically from 12:15 to the end of the day. Again, super extreme case, right? That's changing the password every hour. But I do want to demonstrate that we can support that if the need is there. So this is our starting condition, right? And here's our starting action. What are we going to do every day, every hour from 12:15 to the end of the day? We're going to change the password on certain devices. And that's going to be a reoccurring rule. So the rules themselves are very simple. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this rule and we're going to create it from scratch just so you can actually see what that process looks like. It's a very, very simple rule to create. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. I'm going to right click and add a new rule. And I'm obviously going to name it automated password demo. So the type of rule that we're going to be using is the perform an action on a reoccurring time, right? To automate the process to update passwords, every 30, 60, 90 days, 180 days, whatever that requirement is from the IT department or whoever's making this decision, I'm going to define what that reoccurring time is. So if I click on is executed on a reoccurring time, we see a very familiar interface. So if you've used time profiles in the past, this should look very familiar to you. Here we have our reoccurrence schedule. So from this interface, I can go daily, and let's say that my requirement is to change passwords every 180 days. I could set it up like that. That's going to reoccur every day, every 180 days, and it's going to occur at a specific time. I could go to weekly. Again, you have a lot of options here. It's very flexible. I could go in and say this occurs every 8 weeks or whatever that requirement is on the first Monday. I could go to a specific day of a specific month or the first Monday of every month. Again, you see a lot of different options here. But let's just go with daily for this example, and I'm going to say it's going to be every 180 days. The feature that I really like about this is even though you're saying it's only happening once a day, you can define when that actually occurs. So it's going to occur every day at 2 a.m. As we talked about before, when you change the password, you're actually going to get a little reset, right? The connection is going to go down. So having the ability to change the frequency to a specific time on a specific day is very useful. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. We see that the action is going to occur every 100 days at 2 a.m. I'm going to hit next. No need for a time condition because we did that in the first place. And the new feature is at the bottom of the page on step 3, change the password on hardware devices. Now all I need to do is define which devices I want to change the password on every 100 days. There's a checkbox for recording servers. That's all devices on recording servers. But I could actually go in here and select individual devices. Once I make my selection, I can hit finish because, again, there is no stopping condition, no stopping action. The rule ends on itself and then just reoccurs, in this case, every 100 days. Once I hit finish, that rule is active. These devices will change passwords. They will auto-generate a new password every 100 days at 2 a.m. So very straightforward, very simple, very easy to automate that process to conform to those IT specifications. So that concludes the live demonstration. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining. I appreciate your time, and we will see you at the next 15-minute Feature Friday. Thanks a lot.